All right, so welcome everyone. Got a couple things to share with you. This is a private exam prep session for the Hyperautomation Specialist certification. And as promised, I would do this with you all. I do public events, but this is customized for you all. And so you're going to get a lot more inside information to share with you. And if you're watching this, recording later, should you have any questions and need any help going forward, I've extended, the invitation to, ping me, reach out to me. I'll try to give you clarity on some of the issues that you are being challenged with. Let me go ahead. I'm going to come off camera there, keep my bandwidth down. We had some really bad storms come through last night. And if my audio starts to drag a little bit, you'll let me know because it was misbehaving a little bit earlier today. So, but anyway, yeah, great to see everybody, and smiling faces are all here. So great to see you. A couple things that have changed is the location, or I should say the lack of the exam certification. So the practice exam is no longer going to be found as we had it before. We were able to find that before and actually run through the exam process, the practice exam process. Well, that is no longer available to us. So that's, that's kind of, a bit of a challenge as far as that's concerned, in that now it is going to be at a URL here that is, and I will email that out to everybody so that you have this new location where all the exams, the practice exams are. But if you'll remember from class, we had a real practice exam that you could go through, and it was identical to the real exam. And we don't have that at this time. Now, this is the week that the LMS is transferring over, but it is appearing to me that this is how the exams will be found going forward. Okay. So in the Hyperautomation Specialist, there's tasks here. There is a Hyperautomation Specialist exam guide. So once you're here, and again, I'll send that link out to everybody. Let me throw it in the chat one more time because I know a couple people joined a little bit later. Frank, I understand that they're pretty close to those who have done them. So the question in the chat was, how close are the practice exams to what's found in Udemy? And I understand that is pretty close as far as that's concerned. If this is a public exam preparedness, I would say don't use them, don't trust them. But I do know that I have had other SEs, so this is privately to you all as an SE. I've had other SEs that did use those also for explanation. And the upside of utilizing that is having the answers to the questions. Now, I'm about to show you here what we have discovered also. So in the Hyperautomation Specialist Exam Guide, this is the first step. We'll go into this one. And this is going to, pretty much tell you about the exam, some details of the objectives of the exam, and pass, fail rate type of thing. Now, here is the exam outline. If you remember, this is what we found in the downloaded data sheet before. And again, this data sheet is what I shared with you in class, but I'll also reshare all of this together after this after we get after this this event that we're doing. But mostly because this will give the exam outline here, but it doesn't give the resources to recommend for studying each of these different objectives that are listed. Again, now, if you did take the practice exam, you're going to have that final report that will tell you what areas you're weaker in or that you need to study up on. Being that you don't have a practice exam to take now, you're not going to have that. but this does show you the weighted amount or percentage that the exam does cover as far as the material is concerned. Okay, so for example, Anypoint Platform to monitor hyperautomation API endpoints is 7%, 8% here, 8% here. So you can get an idea of the, percentage of questions or percentage of the exam that covers those particular objectives. So be sure you're familiar with this. There are some rules and regulations, things like that here. And then this will also take you over to signing up for the exam and all of that as well. So that's what this link will take you to. So again, you can either use the exam outline here. It helps to know how it's weighted, or you can use the data sheet here. Okay. Naveen, where can I go on Trailhead to schedule my retake since the training? I'll cover that. I'll cover that for you. Okay. We'll go to that. Bear with me just a little bit. We'll talk about what's changed. Yeah. So that's the first part. Then the second part, where we used to, roll right over and take your practice exam, is a PDF. Okay. And I shared this with, I've shared this with some of you already. This will be the questions of the practice exam. So you're not going to be taking the exam like you did before. You're going to see the questions. And at the very end of all of the questions for the exam are going to be the answers. So you will have the answers here. But the unfortunate thing is, it's not going to be like in a test environment. You're going to see the answers listed here. Now, I don't know if these are the accurate answers. If you have some that you're not sure about, ping me. And I also mentioned to you some information I'll send you as well that will help you determine the actual correct answer. So I've not verified these against, my assessment of the correct answer. But to just, one thing we want to determine is, that you're studying the accurate material. The benefit that this brings is having a feel for how the questions will be asked. Yes, they're going to be harder on the exam. There's no question. Some of them are going to be similar, but they're going to be similar in a way that I do not want you memorizing the answers. Because, for example, one of them in particular, let me see if I can find one. One of them in particular, when it's talking about the system APIs, the process APIs, experience APIs, the question that it has, the actual question on the exam is different. And I'm not seeing it here so fast. But anyway, it's trying to locate. There we go. Like, for example, this, if you memorize and oh, I know which one it is. Well, on the real exam, the wording's going to be different enough that it's going to throw the answer to be a different answer. So don't memorize the answers. Really read the questions. And like I mentioned to you, even in our segment we did for exam preparedness, is, you're going to come into this and you're going to have, on average, is 60 questions. It's a 2-hour exam. So you're going to budget yourself for approximately 2 minutes per question. Some of them are going to be pretty, streamlined, easy to read through. And, as you're picking up some detailed information, it's not going to take that long. Some of the questions are going to even be short and not too complex, so that's good. But the downside is there are going to be some questions that are very long, very long, and you really need to assess and read and take your time. So I always recommend that you start off with the question that's closest to the answers. Okay. Because sometimes some of the information up here might just be a distraction. So you want to find out, what are they asking for here? Okay. What are we looking for? And once you know what your target is, then read through this, scan through this so that you pick up on what are my indicators. Okay. Integrating between Salesforce, NetSuite, and Jira. All right, so now I know I need to use something that is going to be able to integrate between those three platforms. What allows me to do that? Okay, so that's where you're going to be, doing that focus, and then, coming up with the remaining, and then do process of elimination. I'm not really even reading the questions, and saying, oh, I know it's not that. I know it's not that, which actually it probably is. But anyway, you do process of elimination and narrow it down from there. But just watch your time, because the unfortunate thing is you do not want to run out of time. Okay, you don't want to run out of time while you're taking an exam. You want to make sure you get all the way to the end, because likely there could be questions at the very end that are going to be, kind of easier, To answer Naveen's question, let's see what we get when we go to training.mulesoft.com. Now, when we go here and they bounce us right on over into here. All right, so the links that I had before are not the same. And it's not going to be here. Should probably be under, let's see, exams. All right, so we have some exams here. Again, this is all new. See if it's going to let me choose the MuleSoft. Here we go. Okay, so you can see I'm just navigating in. Oh, nothing is here yet. All right. Well, they may not be done with this yet. They may not be done with this yet.
At the top, if you go to, where was it? If you just go to credentials and then certifications.
Uh-huh.
And then there's the MuleSoft certifications.
Okay.
And then if you scroll down just a little bit.
There they are. Okay, good. I wonder why it wouldn't navigate me that other way. Okay, cool. Thank you. Thank you. Here's hyperautomation, schedule now. Okay. So it is bringing us in. Thank you, Tyson. Appreciate that. So this is, and what I've understood, that if you previously had a web assessor account, then you do not need to create one. I'm going to try, yeah, none of these. Let's see if this one will work. I don't know if this is going to work to bring me in, but we're going to find out. Yeah, it did. Okay, so that was my login to training.mulesoft.com that I just used. Okay, and so that.
So if we use our same credentials, it'll get us into Criterion.
It appears so. It appears to me that that was the case. And if I recall, let me see. Let me grab this other link where all of this was before the transition. Because there was a link here. Okay. Is that where yours was? Yeah.
Yeah. So I got an email saying our certifications are moving, your new web assessor account. It mentioned the email address that I need to use in order to create the account. And then you're able to see the list of MuleSoft certifications.
Okay. Okay. Very good. So I haven't yet to get that email yet, unless it got buried, which is possible. What was the email from? Was it MuleSoft certifications? Yeah, I think I got one early on.
Salesforce certification was the.
Okay. Yep, there it is. Okay, so this is what it looks like. Yeah, I got this last month. Was yours last month? Something like this? Yeah. So I just used.
Yes,
okay.
It was last month.
Yeah. So I just used my the email that I had set up for training.mulesoft.com. And those credentials got me in to that. Okay. So where is it? Where was it? Where was it? If we go to this one. see if this takes you. Naveen, you had not scheduled my second attempt on the older versions, so what I see, the retake, it should. Yes, it should. Because that was all part of some of the details. I don't think it's on this email, but if you had, let's see if there, where is the frequently asked questions? There we go. This frequently asked questions page. Documented if you had one to take and you needed to reschedule it and all that stuff, it had all of the information for you. So this should help you to be able to get that rescheduled. Yeah. I switched browsers, so. All right, so this frequently asked questions, here you go. This is going to have all of that information that you need for even the certification names are changing. Here's some migration things. What ifs? There's some what ifs down here. Voucher details. Now you didn't have a voucher. Though I think those were the voucher codes. But what you will see, your part is here at the top, where it says, I was scheduled to take it after what happened. And it says, even if you didn't schedule it, then it should show under Web Assessor after May 6th. So you're after May 6th, it should be showing. So if you want to go check it and see, then it should be there. So beginning May 6th, you can schedule your exam. All of that should be here. And if you want to do the link here of how to schedule the exam, if you've already taken the exam, so you already know a lot of this, but there's some things and it may be a little different on account of it being Web Assessor instead of what we were using before. So you probably will have to, I imagine there's going to be a download that you probably have to do. Okay. So be sure to read the details here and get your system set up in advance before you're actually sitting for that exam. Okay. And for those of you watching the video, any of these links I'm putting in the chat, I will put out when I send you the link to this recording. Okay, I'll include all of those so you can find them easy enough. Any other questions on what to do, where the exams are? Okay, so actually I should have this one. No, not that one. Yeah, I'll have to test that out. I'm due to re-up this one. So this one should be one that shows in my portal. We'll see. Let's see if it's there. But to save you time for me going through all of that with you, I wanted to, go over where things are. Again, there's not that practice environment that we had before for the actual exam. So you're going to have that printed version. And all these are here are to, take you to where those questions are that fall under these categories, which is kind of cool. So you can kind of should be able to click on these links. You're going to take me there? No, it's not going to take me there. Okay. So anyway, we can go down to each one of those categories. So there's a few questions in each of those categories. And I know that some of the areas that, I did get some responses from some of you. And we had some areas that we want to clearly talk about today to review, to go over any details on those specific areas to pass. Okay. Now this, I'm going to jump between two presentations. One's very high level Then I'm going to do some deeper dives out of my course materials of some materials I've created for coaching as well as teaching private classes. So you have your MuleSoft course material, and there's a lot of great information there on the slides. And as I mentioned, as we were going through the classes, that, certain slides are prime for reviewing on some of these topics. And so I'll go back through the ones that, I think are going to be very helpful in some of the materials that are helpful for you here. So we'll talk about the hyperautomation objectives, exam preparedness, some of which we've already talked about, and then some Q&A on some of those questions that we had. For this exam, the products that are used on the exam are the MuleSoft. You have to have a secured API, RPA, Composer, and then we get into some Salesforce products here: Salesforce Flow Orchestration, and Einstein Chatbot. Now, some people have said, are there questions on Einstein Chatbot? According to the data sheet for the exam, Einstein Chatbot is on the exam. Okay, so do be aware of that. Some were under the impression that it was not. So where is it? But I did find it on here. Here it is. Yeah. So Einstein Chatbot is part of the exam. So don't dismiss that. It may not have been in your class that was in question, but it is on the exam. So be sure you're aware of that. Okay. Now there are some new products out. There's IDP, the intelligent document processing, and that's, to my understanding, it is falling under hyperautomation, of course, but it has not been moved over onto the exam. Generally speaking, if it's not in the curriculum or as part of the objective listed on the data sheet or now on that sheet that prepares you, then it's likely not on the exam yet. Okay, so you're good on that. Know that you're good on that. So these are going to be the objectives we dive deeper into, and determining not only a refresher of each of these products, but also to discuss further what products to use when, okay, when, for different types of scenarios. And we can't do this anymore. That just breaks my heart. You're not going to get a report. You'll have to, if you have already taken the practice exam, then you'll have your report from before. But what you can do is use that sheet, either the data sheet that I have, and I'll share that with you, or using the sheet off of the Trailhead Academy that's the same, and just determine, like you're going to have to do a self-determination based on those questions of the areas that you are weaker in, and dive back into those areas, and get best advice is get hands-on, get hands-on. So they may re-up this exam, especially, I have heard some chatter, different directions. They may re-up these exams, especially for internal employees, not so much for public, but I don't know. I'm just hearing, it could be not valid, so I do not know. But above all, the whole focus here, that we want to remember is, it's a lot of material. We covered, all of these different product lines and how to use them and the details of using them. And the biggest challenge is, knowing the product enough to be able to answer the questions confidently and accurately for what the focus of the exam is having. Oftentimes we find that in the real world, we might handle something a little different, but that may not be the philosophy that Salesforce is looking for us to have when it comes to answering the question accordingly. So above all, we want to make sure we're using the right tool for the right job. Now, this is for those exam questions that are asking specifically, what tool would be the best tool to use for this given scenario. And like that one that I started picking apart, that one question that I was picking apart that said, we're using Salesforce, NetSuite, and Jira. Okay, Keith. Yep, sounds good. Ping if you have any questions. Great to have you on. So, those are going to be those type of questions, that you have to ask yourself what product would be the best product for this given scenario. So in the category of knowing what each tool brings to the table, okay, so flow orchestration is going to be something that operates within a Salesforce organization. But what it does provide is it provides us the ability for approvals, for involving different groups or teams or an individual to confirm something. If you remember from our use case, we went in and either verified that the parts were available or verified a date or things like that, as far as the that interaction, that the work guide that was appearing as a result of flow orchestration. So flow will call other flows. Flow orchestration will call other flows, and it provides us with this step-by-step process. Now, if it's a either a background step or an interactive step, that's going to give us that opportunity again to be something that runs in the background. It can run asynchronously with other steps happening at the same time, or if you want to put it in a scenario where they're running synchronous. I know I remember some questions about, the need for approval from a department. I remember questions that were also relevant to the order in which it processed. And so flow orchestration brings that ability in the Salesforce organization to provide that type of business process. Okay. And then, so if this is a weak area for you, I would, I know some of you have a Salesforce organization that you can work with. If not, I'll give you the link or a link that you can create and use a organization that, you can experiment with and work with to create some flows, and then use flow orchestration to process those flows, and again, get familiar with how they're structured. And we're going to go back through today, those some of the features of flow orchestration and see some of those also. Okay, but get hands-on. If Salesforce area here is a bit of a challenge for you, get hands-on. Go out there and create some things and see how they're working there. All right, so Flow Builder also, now Flow Builder again is going to be bound to the Salesforce organization. And it does have the ability, to interact with any of the integrated, like MuleSoft integrated API assets that we brought in, and we created a name credential and external credentials for that. And again, we'll review some of that too. But once that asset's been brought in, it can be used in Salesforce, right? Because it created an Apex class, And so in Flow Builder, we're able to, manipulate that data, read that data, even, post some of that data. So we can interact with that, the MuleSoft API, that REST API that we created. Okay. Then also too, in the MuleSoft category, our Anypoint APIs, the strength that MuleSoft brings is the ability to unlock a database or unlock a backend system, be able to provide a secure endpoint, because in order for it to interact, it does need to be secured, whether you're interacting and bringing it into Salesforce or whether you're using it part of Composer. By the way, this is Composer down here. It does need to be a secured endpoint with some type of authentication associated with it, and it does need to be HTTPS. Okay, you may see some of that on the exam as far as that's concerned, the criteria that's needed. But, you'll get some questions about API-led connectivity, the system, process, and experience API details. So you do want to make sure you have a clear understanding of a system API, process API, and experience API, what they, what types of, what there are tiers, they're just organizational units, but what they mean. Okay. And if you need clarity on that, I will be glad to go over some details on that with you. So the strength that brings is, again, unlocking those systems, a lot of pre-built connectors that are available in that category. The next one is in the RPA category, and this is when there is not an API. Okay, whenever an API can't be used, whenever there's not an API available to unlock or utilize, RPA allows us to create an interaction with, like, for example, our EV website, and go in and click login, also to go in to navigate to different pages. And that allows us to scan a page, scan some documentation, some additional, there's many different things you can do with this as well. We really just touched the tip of the iceberg in RPA in our course material. You can read Excel spreadsheets. You can, output that data into another Excel spreadsheet. You can do quite a bit of information with RPA, but this is when there are legacy systems here that don't have an API endpoint, where your data is somewhat unstructured. We have, again, I won't dive too deep into the IDP at this point, mostly because it does actually work in this category to pull information for you that won't be on the exam. So I don't want to, go too deep down that rabbit trail right now, but it is a portion of the RPA piece that it provides. So with our bots, you do want to be sure, and we're going to review that today. We want to be sure that you understand the life cycle of the RPA processes and what happens at each stage. And, that's going to be part of understanding the life cycle of the RPA and what products are used to support each of those life cycle stages. Okay. And then finally is a look at Composer, and this is the low code product here that we have that allows BAs to come in and interact with many different pre-built connectors. One of the highlights or points to be made here within Composer is you could also actually create two or more, I should say more than one, different connections to a different Salesforce organizations. So you'll have the opportunity to have, multiple Salesforce orgs represented in your Composer flow. So if you see anything like that that's mentioned, of course, you have NetSuite, you have various connectors already pre-built here, as well as interacting with, as we did, interacting with Slack and Google Sheets, our REST API. We were able to interact with our MuleSoft API here. We went and got our rebate. Okay. So all of these are going to be, what tool to use for the job at hand. Okay. So be very clear on what's at each level here. Now there's a real good, and I shared this with you from class, but I'm going to dump all this to you, is this product comparison table. Now, just be aware that some of these things have happened, so like trigger with an inbound HTTP request, that has occurred. So these are going to be, again, a high level understanding of what to use in different situations. So if you've got parallel processing that you need, or big data, or a lot of transformations or details like that in any of the questions, or even on any of the projects you're on, you're going to be looking at using Anypoint Platform, using MuleSoft products for that. Also, too, sometimes it could be RPA and MuleSoft, Anypoint Platform, using an API there. So there might be the possibility of using, a couple different products for the same thing, just depending on the purpose that you plan to use it for. Okay. So high level view, looking at the Anypoint platform products that we are, that we use and the life cycle of an API. This is a review of all of that. And yes, you'll get this, presentation afterwards also. But we start by designing our API using our RAML specification. Once we're satisfied with that design, we publish it to Exchange, and then we could also test it from Exchange, but it became an asset in Exchange at that point. Then we brought it into Studio using that interface. In our case, we didn't all use the interface, which you should use the interface in most cases, and then also create the backend flows that go actually out to the databases and get detailed information, that is needed for getting access to the EV database. Okay, so once we're satisfied with that and we were able to pull all of the 4 different endpoints that we needed, then we deployed it to Cloud Hub by way of Runtime Manager. And again, remember each of these components of Anypoint Platform and what they're used for at each stage of the API lifecycle. So we deployed ours to Cloud Hub. Once it was deployed to Cloud Hub, then we could manage it through API Manager. So once managed in API Manager, then we also went ahead and created a secrets group so that we could also add the TLS context for using HTTPS, which is a requirement for it to be used in Salesforce as well as in Composer. Okay, so we did that, and then we modified our, our proxy that we were using here so that we were also using HTTPS. Okay, so this portion here completed out the life cycle of the API here. And then we went back in, and our next step on this journey was in RPA. Okay, we're going to do a deeper dive into RPA here in just a minute. Once our bot was created, then we could create a connected app for that bot from Anypoint Platform. And then when we use Composer, we were able to use that bot inside of Composer in addition to other pre-built connectors that were here. Okay, so some of the requirements, HTTPS, connected app, are all key factors of that integration and what's necessary. So we'll pause here to go deeper into RPA. So we're going to go into RPA real quick here and look at the products that are used for each of the stages of the life cycle of RPA. I'm going to switch to another presentation here real quickly because it's more detailed. And again, for review for you. And yes, my voice sounds funny. Like I said, I came back, we went on a cruise, came back from a cruise, and I had a cold. So if my voice sounds froggy, that's why. So, all right, so now let's go through the stages of RPA lifecycle here as a review. All right, so we start off with, getting into RPA Manager, right? So from, as we're going into RPA Manager, we have the first phase is the evaluation phase. And in this phase is where we go in and we determine based on the qualifiers and the benefits, what the, if this is going to be something that should be completed and used, and bring value based on, the cost. So there's a couple of different things we fill out here, which is cost and then the qualifiers. So you do want to have a good understanding of the qualifiers and the benefits for the exam. The matrix works off of the qualifiers and benefits. There's actually a cost analysis that is available that you go through, but it's not really part of this matrix. Okay. And so as all of this is part of the matrix, you do want to be aware of what these are. Now, these can be changed. These are the default settings, and the default settings can be modified. So you'll notice here where it says the default evaluation template, those can be modified. Okay. So in our case, we went through this, and then once the process evaluation was complete and we approved it, then we went into the design phase. And in the design phase, this is where we dove deeper. We opened the process and we started doing a recording of the process that we intend to do. So this brought us over and brings us over into using the recording and creating a recording of what is anticipated to be done for our use case. Okay. Some things to remember are these recordings icons, okay, and what they mean and how, basically to record or to stop or pause. But as we went through each step of what was needed for that use case, the recording process created our final results of each of the tasks at hand here. So as we did that recording and we created that, each phase along the way used the RPA recorder in the design phase. So as we were creating this, we would do a task. We would, type in an activity, do something, pause it, do something, pause it, and that's what created our design. But remember, we never used it. We ended up deleting a lot of that information in the next phase, but we did capture what would have been needed. Okay. And oftentimes this would be because a BA or someone in this category was capturing what needed to be done to pass it over to someone else, and then it gets released over into build. So as we go through the life cycle of this and determining, what needed to be created, then in turn we publish this over into the build, and then we get into the RPA builder. And this is where we get deeper into defining all of the information needed for the bot to use, like the activity parameters. And this is in the business process initialization, where we created those activity parameters to be used, like the login information. And then also this one has something different on it. What we used for our class was also the rebate code and the rebate value. Okay, so in the categories of the activity parameters, these provided details that we needed to be used for the bot itself. Now you're going to see some other imaging here. This is based on another class that I do, but it gives you the idea too of what we created in the RPA builder. If you remember, we used the OCR, screen-based optical character recognition, to look for different keywords. And in this case, in this use case, we're actually using an EMS website. And then we went ahead and identified in our parameters what we were going to be using for this particular workflow. And these workflows included our username and password. They are encrypted. Okay, remember that they are encrypted. So we had to use the decryptor. And the decryptor then made those values usable for logging in. Okay. And once we are satisfied and got the information back, remember we use the regex to filter down and get the information from the web page and all the details like that. Once we were satisfied with the entire process, then what we did was we uploaded it back to RPA Manager. So all in this period of time, we were using the RPA Builder. Okay, RPA Builder. So if we look back at this one slide here, evaluation was on RPA Manager, the design was in RPA Manager using the recorder, the build was in RPA Builder, and use the recorder some. And now we're ready to promote to test. Okay. So once we're completed with this, we're ready to upload this, and this gets uploaded to RPA Manager. And then from here, we can promote it to test. Before we can actually test it, though, we need to create a bot API key. Okay, so we created the bot API key, and then we used that when we installed the bot on our virtual machine. And when this is installed on the machine, then we have the configurator that we needed to configure and have this defined. We used also in the testing plan to test it. And as we set the configuration here, this was allowing a remote desktop session onto our virtual machine that allowed it to access the bot details. Okay, and when we did and we tested this out, we could see from our logs that it did successfully run. Many of us didn't have this success. We were able to download the logs, look at the logs, see what was going on with those logs. So if we had a failure, we could look at the log, download it, and look at the analysis package that was part of that failure. Okay. And those are questions on the exam. Some of those features are going to be part of the exam. Now, to be able to make any corrections, you had to bring your process back into the build phase and be able to work on it from there. Okay. Then if it's tested successfully from there, we would go to creating an invocable run configuration for our bot. And then we would, when we go through that process of creating an invocable process, then it would publish it and we would have it available to use in some of our other applications. In Composer primarily is where we use it. So this is where it completes the life cycle. So let me flip back over to this one. Here we go. All right, so this completes the process, and then from there, ops would be managing the bot, and that is all part of RPA Manager as well. So you all should have access to RPA. Is that correct? Give me a green check if you do have access to RPA. No access to RPA. Okay. Can you request access to RPA? Okay. Because what I would recommend doing is going back into RPA Manager, even if you don't have the bots totally set up and all the details on that, but to go through the ops side and take a look around there and see how that's set up and what is available there. Okay. So let me log on really quick to an account here. All right, 1 second here. I'm going to review the ops side here for you real quick, if you don't have access to it. There we go. Okay, so here is our automation account here, which, by the way, we've got intelligent document processing. Woohoo! But I'm going to go into RPA Manager here. And got a bot out here. It's in production, but I did want to review especially some of the areas here for ops. Okay, so we're looking at for ops. So I carried you through to the life cycle of the bot. But in bot management, we have, we come to process monitoring. We can take a look at bot state and operation for ops. There's currently nothing running right now, but if they were, we would be able to see a listing here. Process streaming. This one is showing that it is not running at the current time, but there is one. There is one there. We also have the dashboard. We don't really use the dashboard in the course material. So this one, I don't think there's any questions on the dashboard here, but you can set alerts and alert rules. I, again, do not think that that's on the exam as far as that's concerned, but there is the ability to set some alerts here. So like, for example, an activity run result, we might want to set an alert based on that. And you would get your alerts and details based on any alerts that occurred here. So there is an ability to set alerts based on your bots. We have bot management also, and this is where I'll see all of the bots. Some of them may not be active at the present time, but we see some of the bots that are listed here. Bot keys that were created for those bots are listed. Process run statistics. Nothing's been run. It'd be in the last hour. If I do an interval, I could go longer and I would see some things here. But at any rate, that would show some of the run statistics and some of the bot execution plans. Okay. So in the ops, as far as that's concerned, a lot of the details here are going to have some information that, you know, for supporting that. And again, that's part of RPA Manager. So in RPA Manager, again, from the top, you know, from home, then we can go into your RPA. This is where you will be managing any of the things that are assigned to you, your backlog, anything that was given to your team. Process evaluation details here would show every evaluation that was done on any of the bots that were evaluated. You can change the evaluation criteria, evaluation templates. That's where they are. So if you do not have access to RPA Manager, maybe this will help you to have a refresher on what is done where, okay, within here. All righty, moving right along. So let's see what else we have here. So again, just that's conclusion of RPA Manager. One second here. And of course, it's always fun to remember how fun the bots were to the point of wanting to bonk them when they weren't working. But we did succeed, right? We did conquer. And actually, I think that your delivery of the class was, they made some modifications in the configuration of the VMs. And I think yours was actually the best class thus far. Not because of the people, but I should say, yeah, because of the people. But in addition, there's some, they made a few modifications to the virtual machine. All right, the next thing we're going to talk about is Composer. And the biggest thing I want to remind you is that Composer is a tool that is considered to be low code. Let me go back to. Yeah. Here we go. Composer is a feature, of course, is now embedded in Anypoint Platform. And as you go into Composer, this gives you the ability to come in and start creating flows. Make that a little bit bigger so you can see what's going on here. Allows you to come in and create flows that do not require you to write a lot of code. Now, remember, it was a little tedious in configuring the details of our endpoints when we use the HTTP connector here. But once that is done, it's actually very streamlined in interacting with a REST endpoint. Okay. So anyway, in Composer, we have trigger conditions. So let's take a look at some trigger conditions here. And let's play with a practice flow here. Okay, so I have a trigger here. And the trigger, I want to point out to you, be sure you're aware in Composer, the trigger frequencies. You've got 15 minutes all the way to 30 days. There is not a cron. There is not a custom configuration here. The least amount of time on a Composer trigger is 15 minutes. You have your intervals, and your highest is 30 days. Okay, so remember that. Another thing to remember is a Composer flow will only wait up to 3 minutes for a process to continue. So let's say this action here takes longer than 3 minutes. Composer will time out. 3 minutes. Remember that. Okay. So we have our trigger that starts things off. And then after that, then we can begin to add some actions of what's going to occur next. Now you see, we're just clicking. We can click through this. We can create things. It's very low code. So when you see a question that is, has comments in it or wording in it that are focused on, a low code or not needing the IT department, or a business administrator wants to create something, anything like that, I want you to lean into Composer for those solutions. Okay. Another thing that is going to, I want you to be aware of is your options in your steps. You can choose a system action, a variable, or logic. In the logic category, you've got an if-else block or a for each block or loop, and then error handling. I don't know that I put have error handling there. I'll review that with you. So these are your steps. And in the category of the system actions is where you're going to see all those pre-built connectors. Okay, we have all these pre-built connectors. And there's a new feature that you can also bring in an API from Anypoint Platform as a shared API. That's brand new. That's a newer feature. And I did get it in there. Who was it that told me about it? It was someone, I think, in this class that shared with me, oh, there's a new feature, and I figured it out. I did it. So anyway, I could either connect with this API here. Charles, go ahead. That wasn't you, was it?
Yes, I was about to say that. I did a demo on that.
Okay, cool. Yeah. Very good. So I figured it out. And I brought this one in here. So when so now we have, if it's an API that's on Anypoint Platform, we're able to share it within Composer this way. But now that probably is not going to be on the exam because that's pretty new. Okay. But at any rate, we have all of these other pre-built connectors that we can use. We use the HTTP connector, if you remember, and that's how we connected in with our API and many others here. But now notice too, we have Salesforce. And so we have the ability to configure multiple Salesforce accounts here. So if we wanted to interact with different Salesforce orgs from Composer, it is supported here. We can do that. Okay. Or NetSuite or any of them. Like that one question we peeked at there, it was talking about Salesforce, NetSuite, and Jira. Okay, so we've got Salesforce, NetSuite, and Jira. Without reading that question further, I would pretty much say that this would be our solution, right? So when on the exam, when you're hearing of different products to connect to that have connectors here, then I want you to be thinking Composer. Okay, I want you to be thinking Composer. All right, so we did do, in our case, the HTTP request, and we configured that out. And then, of course, all of the data was available through here. And then this is the error handler. And remember, if we use the error handler has the two different areas, the watch category and the on error category. Okay, and we added different things in the watch area, and it can be very extensive. Remember, we had quite a bit happening in the watch area. And if an error occurred during that area, then it would come down to the on error. And we can control what happens here. Okay, we can either continue it or stop it, or we can say all of the conditions must be met, whatever the case may be. Okay, so there's what, you know, with the error handling that we have, we can utilize that also. And yeah, that's good. I think I was just showing different Salesforce connectors there. Okay, any questions on Composer? Okay, a couple things to remember. Go ahead.
Yeah, Diane, is there any question on, you know, to me, to my limited knowledge on Composer is lacking the Anypoint features like high availability, high throughput, right?
Right.
Those kind of things. So is there any questions in the test around that?
I'm trying to remember. And of course, you know that there's a data bank of, or, you know, question bank, because I did get different questions on my first attempt than I did on my second attempt. So know that your questions will be different from attempt to attempt. I can't promise you one way or another if it does say something like that, but if it did say something about high availability or even heavy transformations, or large data, you would not choose Composer. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I even had a real case where our partners came in and say, oh, you cannot use Composer. So it makes sense. You don't expect a business analyst to know SQL. So that's why you don't put a database connector in Composer. But in reality, AEs doesn't know that. So some of the AEs only sell Composers. So
yes, true. And that's where we would want to lean on using either the shared API or the HTTP connector to let a Mule app manage that for us.
Exactly.
Yeah. Great point. Yeah, so there are the limitations as far as that's concerned. The time frame, the 3-minute, you know, if you have a long running script, like let's say you are using the HTTP or the shared API, and it's a large batch job that you know is going to take longer than 3 minutes, then this is not a good fit. Remember that Composer will only wait 3 minutes. Well, 3 minutes are the limit. Hopefully it wouldn't take that long, but if it's a long running batch job, yeah.
So the 3 minutes cannot be configured.
Cannot. That is true. Yep. Okay. All right. Okay, so coming off of Composer, the next thing we're going to talk about is the integrations. Now, this is where we're going to be looking at the benefits that Salesforce brings to us. And that's going to be in this category here. So those were the MuleSoft components, right? So we talked about the MuleSoft components, and that's these guys. And now we'll go over into the Salesforce components. And on the Salesforce side, we have the products are the Salesforce Flow, Salesforce Orchestration, and Einstein Chatbot. Now, there are integrations that take place between Salesforce and MuleSoft. And these are on the exam. You're going to see questions centered around these of the, what happens when you log into Anypoint Platform from Salesforce, what gets generated. So we're going to talk about the automatic process that occurs when we do that, when we set up that integration. And then when we want to bring in our own access to the API, which we do, and the result of that, and importing that API as a MuleSoft service. So we'll talk about these integrations. These are the integration pieces that make the automation streamlined. Okay, so the first part is this, taking a closer look at when we're in on the Salesforce platform, when we're in the MuleSoft services, and we log into Anypoint Platform, and we just go ahead and click on this, it brings up our login, we log in, these automatically get created. Okay, the named credentials, which is the name of your connection to that external system, you know, what it is. In our case, it is Anypoint Platform. The external credential, now the external credential is where the credentials and the authentication method is determined. Like in our case, we did basic authentication. We could have used bearer token. There were different options we could have chose, but this is the authentication method that we use. And then automatically what got created is a permission set also. And that allows the users to make that call to the external system. So these automatically got generated, including an auth provider. And all of this is what got automatically generated. I've got to really, this page is also a page. Let me see. Yeah, here it is. Let me grab this link here, because there is even more description of this that I recommend. If you want, you know, clarity on this, go and read this. Let me see if this link works for us. Yeah, very good. Okay, so this link is working nice. All right, so I don't know why it puts up this little extra thing here. Hold on. There we go. Okay, so now you have the URL. And if you scroll down, there's a lot more description here that you might want to read through, like what is an external credential? Well, first of all, what is a name credential? What is the external credential? The permission sets, all of this stuff. These are the things on the Salesforce platform that you want to make sure you understand, because there'll be questions surrounding this. Now, when we log into Anypoint Platform from Salesforce, this is automatically generated. But then we have to go back, and when we want to configure access to Anypoint Platform for our API proxy we created, we have to manually create these. Okay, so the first step is we went in and we did the external credentials. And so if we look at, you know, okay, what are the external credentials? That's determining what kind of authentication method you want to use. Okay, so in our case, we use basic authentication. There were different things. You should have access to a Salesforce organization to play around with. If you don't, let me grab this real quick. You can set one up pretty easily and be able to work with this and practice with this a little bit so that you are seeing these firsthand. Okay. A nice area you can play around and break it and fix it and break it some more. So if you go to the developer Salesforce and create a developer account, it's going to allow you to get in here and create an external credential. Try out those other options. So that was our first step, is to configure the external credentials. We did basic auth, and we actually created a custom header. So in our case, we used something kind of different. Then the next step was, after we completed that, then we went in and we created a named credential. And this is where we're saying, okay, this is for this particular API. And we're going to use, here is the URL for that API, right? And this, we're going to use the basic auth. That's why you have to do the external credentials first. so that you can then use the external credential you created. Okay, and once that's done, that gets created, and then you have the name credentials as well as your external credentials. You've got both of those pieces done. And so that would also be under the name credentials here. Okay. And then the next thing we need to do is the permission set. So that's this segment here. You can read some details on that. And in our case, we went in and we created the permission sets, and we went in and we, once we created the permission set, we went in and added our basic auth over to be used for this particular permission set. Okay, so all of this had to be done for the configuration for that integration piece for our API proxy that we had created in API Manager on Anypoint Platform. Okay, so all of these were completed. And then the final step is we have access to it, but we want to use it now as an imported API. And this is the final step of bringing it into Salesforce to the point of where Salesforce then takes these endpoints and has them available for us to use as Apex classes within Salesforce Flow. So this brings it even deeper into where we're able to use it within Salesforce Flow. So on the Salesforce Flow side, now we jump into Salesforce Flow, and there are a lot of questions around Salesforce Flow. Again, when you go in and create this account, you're going to have example flows to use. And you can create your own, but you can also see some examples out here that you can learn off of and work with. Let me set something up really quick. So if you want to create one real quick while we're on the call, create one real quick, because we're going to look at some of the flows that are out here by default. Let me save this or I'll forget it. Here you go. Okay. Oh. All right, so it's going through the process. Now, once you, and this is a developer account, you should know, you should have access to this, but I encourage you to get out here and work with these. Okay, work with these so that you are familiar with how they're working. Okay, so it'll say verify your account, go out to your email that you used to create this account. I'm on the other screen going there. And then this is going to be a great playground for you to work with to learn more about Salesforce Flow and also to orchestration. Einstein should be activated in this. I think that it is on a trial account or a developer account. It has not come through with my request because it's saying check to verify your account. Let me see if it went anywhere else. No. All right. So I'm going to give it a few minutes for that to come through, and I'm going to keep going forward with our slides for right now. Okay. So Salesforce Flow, we've got a lot of things happening here. Toolbox on the left where we can have our resources, any of our variables that we create, any of our decisions that are here. And then we have our elements. So pay attention to the terminology here, the naming convention of the elements, the variables, you know, different things that are used here, including also what is known as a connector. That is actually a connector in Salesforce. It throws you off a little bit because in MuleSoft, a connector is an actual connector that we use to connect to a, either a database or an endpoint or something like that. But at any rate, you do want to understand the terminology here. Okay, so that you're clear on the terminology and, what is available there. Now, in the, let me go see if that has come through yet, because I want to show you a couple things in Flow. Nope, it's taking its time. There we go. All right, so it finally came through. And once you get this, you verify your account. And then it should bring us in here. Okay, so it's going to be getting it set up. Okay, so what I would want you to do is to create that account, go in and do the process of the integrations that we've already talked about here. I would go through those, look at them, look at the name credentials, external credentials, really get familiar with a lot of that, review it, make sure you're good with it, have an API that you can go ahead and bring in, see that it comes in and that it will create those Apex code for you as far as that's concerned. And then also to, well, that's jumping ahead to, well, hold on, let me go to our next one here. Okay, so I'm going to show you some slides off of this other presentation here also to refresh your memory on some of the elements. So again, they are elements when we use these different icons within Salesforce Flow. And the elements allow us to, for example, in this case, this particular action is getting, there we go, getting patient details from our API. Okay. And what we're doing in this case is we've started a patient loop. So for all of the list of patients that I got in, I'm using the loop to go over per every record, then for each of every record, mapping that data over. Remember, we did the mapping and set the variables there. So we did an assignment. So you do want to know what the different types of elements there are that provide you with the steps that you can take for each of these along the way. And so we did an assignment, which is a mapping. And then we also, once we got the record details, we did it with our promotions or our parts. I think it was our parts. And when we had our parts for each promotion, then we added them to our whole list of the promotion of the parts. In this case, it's doing a record of a patient record list. And once it completes on the very last record, it comes out. And then, as you can see, in this case, we create a patient record, whereas in the parts, we create the parts record of the parts needed for a given promotion. So as it's going through the flows and through the process of everything that it's needing to do here, it will run through the for each loop to provide that information to happen. Now, there's a couple things too you want to be aware of that in the avenue of using some of the other elements. This is a great example of the different flow loops. You can use a loop with a decision. You can do a loop. This one, in this case, is just doing a loop for each item. And when it completes, then it will update those records. This next one, I should have one that also shows it with a decision. No, that's not it. Let me see if I can find it. I thought I put it in here. It's a loop with a decision. No. I thought I had it in here. All right. But anyway, you can add a loop with a decision that brings it out of that loop as far as that's concerned. All right. Well, my Salesforce thing is good here. Hold on. So get out here and get this created for you. And in here, what I want you to do is we'll go to setup. And in setup, we're going to go to flows. Okay. And process automation, we have flows here. Okay, so this is what comes bundled in with a developer account. And there's various flows here. You've got screen flows, you've got an evaluation flow, you've got auto launch flows. Okay, so we have different types of flows that you can look at and learn from. You can create your own. You can create the ones from the course material. You can create some of the ones from some of the trails, because I know some of you are challenged in the Salesforce area. So get in here and get hands-on with some of these. So if we look at the flows and we want to even create a new flow, okay, in the new flow area, we can see these are the core types of flows: screen flow, schedule triggered flow, auto launch, record, platform event, or an orchestration. If we go to all templates, we can see all of the different types of flows that can be created. Now, the exam doesn't go so far as to requiring you to know all of this, but do be familiar with the types of flows you can create in Salesforce. And yes, Naveen, very good. The difference between these flows, like a screen flow, is going to actually require interaction. Okay. Yes, they do ask about auto launch and screen flows. Yes. So auto launch means that it's invoked by another process altogether. Notice that it's invoked by another process, our REST API. Something else is triggering this flow. It's an auto launched flow. Okay. Whereas a screen flow is going to require the interaction with someone based on a screen display. And when that is triggered and that is ran, then they're going to have to interact and answer some or fill in fields based on a screen interaction. So that is some of the difference between the different types of flows. Yes. Now there are others. Some of them are based on a scheduler. Some of them, now orchestration is included in here. Notice that orchestration is included. So this is showing all of them. If I go to, there's a record triggered flow, and basically what that means is this, it has a little description here. You can see what the descriptions are for each one. That kind of gives you an understanding of it. But like when a new record is created, updated or deleted, then this flow will run. Okay, David, thank you. Then this flow will run. So depending on the kind of flow that you are going to create, it's going to behave differently, and you're going to have different configurations based on what you've chosen. Now, the other factor is there's the, as I said, the screen flows, schedule trigger flows, auto launch, and record trigger. These ones are probably going to be the ones in your forefront. I would recommend coming out here and creating each type of them. Now, in our examples, you can see that there are some flows already created here for you, and you can come in here and see the logic behind this screen, the screen flow, okay? And get an idea. See the interaction? It's waiting for interaction. You're going to get, let's see where it starts off with. Okay, your fees are prompted here. So you have interaction here, okay? So as you're going through these, take a look at some of these flows. Let's go to another one. Let's go to a auto launch flow, create order summary flow. So this one, you won't see that interaction that's required. It's actually started based on these conditions, okay? A record is created or updated. There's two conditions. Let's check them out, okay? So we want to know, and this one is going to be triggered when the status is activated. And there is something about an order source channel ID, and it is needing a value here. So it's probably needing something to be ran there. But there are conditions associated with this one. It's a record triggered flow. Then it gets the records, a decision is made, etc., and it goes from there. So you can get a feel for, I would come out here and look at each type of flow that is here and what the configuration is, kind of what it does, so that you're a little more familiar with the type of flows. Salesforce scheduler flow. Okay, so this one's going to be based on a schedule. Okay. Based on a schedule, does it tell us what that is? Let's see. You're going to give me an edit on this? Probably not. Okay, so it's going to be based on some kind of a schedule. And without going in on that one, I'm not sure what triggers that as far as the time frame that it's doing. There is some interactions with a screen flow here on this one. Okay, so I'm not terribly familiar with this one, so I can't give you my experience on that one. But there is a special kind of flow. There's two other flows I want to be sure that we talk about from here, which is the evaluation flow. Okay, and that is on the exam. The evaluation flow goes hand in hand with a orchestration flow. Okay, so we have an orchestration flow here. Now this one's a little different. So we'll go ahead and look at a flow orchestration here. Is there any others? I don't think so. I think there's only this one. Okay, so we'll look at this one. And this one is going to be the stages and the steps. Okay, so this is bringing us over into orchestration. And in orchestration, boy, that's blurry. Sorry about that. But in orchestration, we can see the various stages and steps inside of this type of flow. So let's look at some of that now and get a feel for the stages. So if we click on the stage and edit it, this gives us an idea. Okay, this is a stage, and it'll be marked complete when all of the steps have been completed. Okay. So if we open this up, we can see that, you can choose different configurations of this phase or stage, of this stage. Okay. And in each of these steps, now there are some different types of steps here that we don't talk about in the course that are, there's a readiness step, a status step, and an interactive step. We use the basic elements. So if I were to add a stage here, let me add a stage. Okay, I'm going to just call it test. And then I'm going to look at these steps. So in our case, we can see it when you have CMS role-based interaction and CMS involved here, you're going to get a lot more action or a lot more options than we got in our organization that we were working out of for our class. But you can see there's the background step and the interactive step, and those steps are the ones in particular that we used in our use case. And that I don't believe, does anyone remember that's taken the exam, the CMS steps reflected in the exam? I don't think they are. Naveen, do you remember? I don't think that they're listed. Yeah, because those are kind of special case type of things, and that could very well be because this is for CMS. Let me come out of this one. Yeah, let me create. If you've got one of these created, I'm going to create an orchestration flow. And
Hey, Dan,
Yeah.
this is Arjun real quick they didn't specifically ask about CMS steps, but I think a lot of the questions were around just what specific steps would be used in what kinds of situations. I think strategically how you would go about using that. Like in some of the decisioning too, like when would you combine the if else with one of the looping mechanisms? It was things like that And there were like answers that were very similar, but a little confusing. I think when you shortlisted down to the one or two options, you have to really get that wording down to understand what that particular thing, what that particular execution is doing. Is it first evaluating if and else and then parsing through a list of items, or are we evaluating a list first, shortlisting that, and then doing an if and else after? It was like questions like that, I think, that at least threw me off on the test.
Something along the lines of, it's not gonna be this one, but like, and this is in Salesforce Flow, not Composer, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Okay. Okay, there is I was looking for a diagram that showed, and I brought it in on one of the events that I did. So let me see if we can create that, or at least a scaffold of it. All right, so let me do a new flow here. And we'll say that it is a auto launched. Okay, so if we have tell me again, it's like a loop, right? With try to remember the scenario. What was it again?
I don't remember the exact scenario, but I remember it was a question around where there was an instance where a list was being evaluated, like we were connecting to some sort of a list and pulling a list, or doing a get records, I think,
Okay.
and collecting a list and then parsing through that list and then making a decision like an if and else choice on it. I think the question was on the best practice. Did it make sense to do the loop prior to the if else, or do the if else first?
Okay.
So it was
Okay.
like the nuance of when you would do it one way or versus the other. And there were two answers that sounded exactly the same, and I really struggled with that question. I marked it as revisit on the exam, and I spent the last 5 minutes, and I'm pretty sure I got it wrong.
Uh-huh.
But I remember that was one of the questions that really threw me off, because almost like one was completely wrong, so I could eliminate it down to 3 answers. I was fairly certain about one of the 2 answers, but the second option sounded exactly the same, so that's what really threw me off. So I wasn't sure how to approach that kind of a question, right? Like, what is the fundamental rule of, hey, when you get this kind of a question, when you're doing an evaluation, what is best practice? I guess part of this is built on best practice, right? What is
Right.
recommended approach by MuleSoft on how to tackle these kinds of situations? So when you're doing a get records and you're shortlisting for certain requirements, what is the best practice? Is it running the loop first, parsing through the list, and then doing an if and else to finally shortlist that, or is it situational, right, where you eliminate a bunch of answers by just saying if this or that, you get a subset of that and then parse through that list and then select the right option based on a certain criteria. Sorry, I don't remember the exact question.
I
but
know it's hard, isn't it?
yeah,
trying to
it was that
see-
one of those kinds of questions that really got me confused on the exam.
Yeah. I'm trying to see. I have, I don't know how the question was worded, but I know that, like, this is a simple thing, like what we did. We have a loop, we assign it, we collect it, right? We're making a collection. But if we have to make a decision in that loop, and none of these are showing a decision. I know that, if a decision's made, it would branch out of the loop. That would be one way you could branch out of that loop. What would be by having a decision inside the loop. But I don't know how the question's worded, so I don't know that I could even tell you exactly how that is. But one thing to note for best practices they say do not update anything in a loop and individually update everything, actually collect it together and then update it. That I know is a big deal. That is pointed out in, different, some of the different material also, like don't do an update inside here. And they're showing that same thing. You update after the last item here, but it going in conjunction with a decision is what I would be after here.
That makes sense, I guess, because you also don't want to keep updating records, right? It makes sense to make sure that you're sorting whatever the criteria is that you're sorting for, and then applying that change based on the update at the end.
Right. Any kind of an update, but a decision, now that's a little different. And remember, in the decisions, like we could do something and set a value based on a decision here. That if there was a decision to be made, or a decision could be in here with the outcome. And this one, if it didn't apply to this one, you could even close this one down. Or take no action, so there's things you could do with a decision inside there, but I don't know, how, Naveen, do you remember that question? Does that ring a bell to you? Well, okay. I don't know if this would help, but
No worries, Dan. I don't want to derail us, but that was just one of the things that threw me off. The other thing around flows was the differences between cards and interviews, and they had like a scenario of this is what they're doing, how many interviews and how many tests apply, and how many cards were needed, and I kind of knew what they were talking about, but then I was like, how does this even tie in, like the card concept? So I got really confused on that question, but
yeah, that one. And let me see if I have this one. Let me see if I can get logged into my Salesforce account here. Another one that does have some flows in it here. Okay. Okay, so when we do the debugging is where, let's see if this one's gonna go. The debugging is what allows us to create the cards, the interview and the cards. Okay, so for every test you run, an interview is started and is getting the data. And so essentially, remember that an interview is when you run a debug run, right? You're running the test. And as it comes through, it will create these to me, as it's referring, are the cards of every element of what's occurring. And you can see the results of them as it is going through the phase of each of it. So an interview creates these cards. So you would need to make sure that you're however it's worded, and I know it's worded a little, hard to follow, but really break it down to make sure that, it essentially would be one interview per each test that you run, for each debug that you run. So you're running the debug again. When I run this again, it's another interview and the cards get recreated.
So each run is one interview, correct?
Yes.
And there are multiple cards associated to each interview. And at the very least, there's 2 cards to an interview, right? Or is it Yeah, it would be
depending
two.
on however many elements you have.
Right. So if we started with a basic flow, like with nothing in it, right? You'd have a start and an end, right? Like we've created a new flow.
Yeah. Right.
So you'd have a, yeah, once you get through that, we'll take a look. Yeah, so you have a start and an end.
Yep. And it won't even let you run it.
Oh, interesting. Yep. Okay, that makes sense.
Okay. So you have to do something here before it will run. Check out an action. I should be able to get a patient and see here is my API. This is the Apex class that it created from that API. Should have two. Let's see, let's get patients. Advanced. And see, here's where it should show the apex defined and start typing patient. There it is. Multiple values and done. Okay. So now what it should do, oh, that should be get. You gonna like me? Let's see if it lets me do this. I named the API the same thing as my variable. All right. All right. So now I should be able, let me save it and label it. Oh, whoops. All right. Okay, now I can debug it. Okay, so how it started, I got my patients, and how it finished. Okay, so there's a start, finish, and for every element that you have, it's going to create that card of what happened.
Got it. So you have three cards here, right?
Yeah, if you could call that a card, I guess you could. Yeah, yeah, because it's how it started, how it ran, and how it finished, right?
Yep, makes sense.
Yep. And Dan's asking, does the test dive into orchestration calling a flow? Like if I run an orchestration interview that calls a flow also interview, is that considered two interviews or just one? There is debugging here, but orchestration doesn't have the debugging. In orchestration, and I should have a orchestration flow.
That's right. To answer Dan's question, though, that kind of a question didn't come up in terms of interviews because it was tied to orchestration and it didn't really apply. It only was tied to flows and testing.
Yeah. But see, you don't have a debug here, Dan. This is orchestration, an orchestration flow, and you don't have a debug.
Okay. But I believe you can see the orchestration runs, or you can see all the types of interviews, even whether it's orchestration or flows in the runs.
Okay.
I think. I'd have to refresh my memory on that, but
Yeah, let me know, because I would like to know that too.
okay.
Yeah. But I think like what they're referring to on the exam is really just the actual
Just the
It did-
terminology.
interview of the flow, you know?
I did
Yeah.
see questions with respect to invoking flows within Orchestrator,
Yeah.
right? Different
Yeah.
types of flows that you could access within Orchestrator.
Yes.
And in what situations would it be record triggered versus auto launched versus screen?
So you would have to, well, think about it. If orchestration is running it, then you would not be doing you in your steps here. Let me go to another one here and create a new one. So when you're doing record triggered orchestration, it's going to call, like, this will trigger based on something that's happened. A record's created, right? And do case here. And no conditions. All right, so we'll go here that a record triggers this and we have a stage. So now we're adding steps. And when we add we have a background step and an interactive step. Now there are the other ones that were there too, but these are the primary ones that we work with. So the background step's going to occur, and based on the action, if this is a flow that you're calling, like in this case, we've got a flow that it's calling that flow. So if it's a background step, it needs to be the type of flow that is, invocable, because it's calling that, right? It's not a triggered flow because we are calling it here. Let me get back to where it was. We're calling it here. This one wouldn't be triggered, right? It needs to be invocable. If we're doing a background or in an interactive, then this gives us different options based on the type of flow that this is, because it's going to be interactive. So we have different options depending on the type of step that it is, whether it's invocable for background. Notice there's not much, there's minimal amount of options we can use for this action because it is a background step. It's triggering that, it's orchestrating that flow. Whereas interactive allows you to access different types of flows here. And those are probably going to be screen flows. Let me open up a new link here and let me look at what the CMS notify or create a case. Okay. So
Yeah, those are screen flows, I believe.
yeah. So these flows, yeah, notice they are going to be create a case. They're going to be, so the interactive flows need to be a screen flow. The background are going to be the auto launched. Does that make sense? Because they're a background step. And so your choices, if you look at it, your choices are going to just really lead you into that direction anyway. This one here, that was a recurrent schedule flow. Recurrent schedule flow. Auto launched, yeah.
Yeah, and this is the mistake I made for the exam. I kind of took these nuances for granted, recalling I knew what an interactive step was, but then I think the test kind of went into sort of these nuances a little bit more, and that's where I just couldn't recall.
Yeah.
And I was guessing. So I think to your point earlier, actually stepping through it and building out a couple of flows will be helpful just to kind of recollect what the restrictions are based on what the stages are, what are the actions you're taking. Is it a background step versus an interactive step?
Yeah.
What doors does that open up in terms
Yeah.
of able to manage that flow from there?
Yeah. Yeah. And you can do decisions in here and orchestration also. With multiple, you can add different outcomes here. Okay, so you have multiple outcomes there based on that. You can add your stages here also. So you have a lot of ability within orchestration to do many different things here. But yeah, the best thing to do is get out here and, review and play around with it. There's a lot of examples already made, or you can walk back through some of the material and do some of the ones we created. You're going to not have all of the options of what was pre-built. Many of you may be able to still access your Salesforce org from the class. I'm not sure. You can try your login from before. I don't know if they shut them down or still have them up, but either way, you can do this and come out here and at least get more familiar with it. Okay. But good. Then the other thing too is the final steps, kind of watching time here, is the Einstein chatbot. And it also has, you'll have, I believe the questions are centered around terminology, naming convention here also of what the capabilities are for the Einstein chatbot. And I am not sure if we can get into Einstein in here or not. I'd have to see if it's, I think I found out that it is part of the developer set. I'd have to think about how to get in here. Is it service setup? There we go. Yeah, so this is here also. Okay, and then you come down here, you've got to create your bot. You've got to do some things. It's all, standard bot. I don't think the exam covers the enhanced bot. And scratch. And then you put your menus here. Something like that. Anyway, you get the idea. Embedded, no. Let it proceed. And then you'll be in this environment to play around with the steps also. Okay. So then there's permissions you have to do also. There's some various things here, but now you're in. You've got your main menu. You've got your options here of your different, details, and you can kind of, come in here and play around with this one a little bit too. So I hope that has helped. I hope that's helped. And I'll share this presentation with you. There's also some good tips here. Some of these might have moved. These are all trailheads. No, that one here for RPA is probably moved. So that might need to be updated as far as that's concerned. But again, on some of these exam questions, these are in your pack now in that PDF, but just don't memorize the answer. I want you to be careful to read the questions, and as you go through each of them, really focus on, notice this one, which tool should be used to build this solution without the help of IT. Okay, there's that example question. It's going to bring you to Composer, right? So I hope this has helped you all. And like I said, please don't be a stranger. If you have questions or you need help, just let me know. And also let me celebrate the victory with you too. Send me a message to let me know how you've done. And if you're watching the recording, that goes to you all as well. I'll be sending out the recording and some of the information that I promised you within about definitely by tomorrow morning. Because I've got a class to prepare for to teach tonight. So anyway, thank you all. It's great to have spent some time with you again, and I look forward to seeing you. Let me pause, stop the recording here. There we go.